Welcome to the Provisionist Perspective. My name is Drew.
My name's Eric.
And with us, we have a very special guest today, which none of you will know. There's been no controversy about him and things that he said on the internet at all this week. None other than Warren, the idol killer McGrew. He may have ruffled a few feathers this week.
Hey,
and we're
hey guys,
talk
look at us. You guys look really good on your surfboards because we're riding the algorithm.
That's right. Surf's up, buddy.
We certainly are riding the algorithm. You know, I figured we'd jump on here and give our 2 cents. And then I was having a chat with Warren and just thought we'd bring him on, you know, rather than talk about the things that he said. So he was keen and available. So we're excited to have him here. And, you know, you were just talking behind the, you know, backstage, Warren, before we started, that you, as far as you were concerned, this came out of nowhere. You know, you're just minding your own business on X and on the internet, and suddenly Jordan, is it Hatfield?
Hatfield.
Or Hatfield? Is he one of the Hatfields? The Hatfields.
He's the Hatfields. I'm the McGrews. Mm-hmm.
Jordan, are you guys still beefing with the McCoys? The internet wants to know.
Up in the West Virginia Appalachian Mountains, you know it's still brooding. Moonshine doesn't let those kind of feuds settle down. Unlike, you know, Calvinists and Arminians, Hatfields and McCoys keep it going.
Oh yeah. And he posted this. I guess it was a YouTube short and shared it on Twitter. And from where I was sitting, it blew up mainly on Twitter. Mm-hmm. And I wish that I had it queued up here to play, but my prep time got away from me, so I don't have it here. Warren, do you want to give a summary of kind of what you said, how it's been interpreted, and how it's kind of gotten out of hand, and just all of it?
So like you mentioned, it kind of caught me off guard. So I had created, you and I were joking about different memes, and so I had created a Calvinist meme where it's like, you know, God wants me, you I'm not so sure about. And I posted that, and that started blowing up on Twitter. And I was like, oh, that's cool. It's catching on. Wasn't really expecting much. And then somebody messaged me and said, man, you're blowing up on Twitter. And I'm like, yeah, that meme kind of got a few views. And they're like, what meme? And I was like, you know, the meme. And they're like, no, dude, we're talking about you and infant sacrifice. And I was like, what? And it just caught me off guard. And so what had happened was, I went on Soteriology 101 with Leighton and Jordan, and we were discussing, it was like a provisionist roundtable or something. I don't remember. I don't remember the whole context, but at some point in the conversation, Leighton mentioned about how your children may not be elect, you know, and your friends may not be elect, and how can you be okay with this, like knowing that God didn't want them. He passed over them. He had whatever terminology you want. I think he was kind of vague. We weren't trying to be super precise on our theology there. And it sparked an idea in my head. And I'm politely waiting for Leighton to stop talking, you know, because I want to contribute to the conversation. And so I'm listening to him. And eventually it gets to like a lull. And I'm like, oh, Leighton, by the way, you said something. It kind of got me thinking. You know, I mean, you know, if you, and I didn't say infant damnation to my transparency here. I'm thinking infant damnation. So I'm thinking, what can I compare and contrast this to? Infants being sacrificed to Molech, you know, and it got me thinking, like, you're okay sacrificing a baby as a pagan to Molech. You've got your reasons, right? Sure, you love your baby, but you got your reasons. And I was like, well, how can you be okay with God passing over your infant child and them possibly being damned? Now, I don't always connect the dots verbally for my audience. You know, sometimes I assume they're riding the same thought train that I am, and maybe I may miss a few junctions. But I thought everybody would kind of understand what I was saying. So I was just like, oh, look, there's a similar mindset behind it. And made the comment in passing, and we carried on, and it was in the middle of one of our infamous like 3 to 4 hour live streams there that nobody watches, you know. I mean, they watch 5 minutes of it. It does get views, but then they're like, I just
finished it earlier today at the gym. I watched all of it. It was on 2 times speed, so it's only like an hour and a half for me, but I watched it.
it's difficult, man. It's a marathon. And so I'd forgotten I'd ever said it. I mean, it wasn't like I was like, oh. And so weeks go by, Jordan posts this thing, it starts blowing up, and I was like, when was I on that show? I don't even remember the episode. Like it was kind of like out of my mind. And so I go and I watch it, and I'm like, what's everybody upset about? Like, are there really that many Calvinists that are affirming infant damnation? I'm thinking like, I thought that was a minority view. Why are all these people coming out of the woodwork? And usually they're quiet about it. They're not coming out going, we believe God roasts babies. They're not not like vocal about it. They're usually quiet and they whisper it over coffee, in men's Bible studies when their wives aren't listening, because they can handle the real deep stuff and they don't want to bother their sensitive wives. And so I'm thinking like, this is not usual. This is uncommon. And I didn't even really pay attention to the title of the video until yesterday evening. And there was a Calvinist on Facebook, and he's like, Warren said this and Warren said that. And, Warren said Calvinists don't care about their kids and that we're okay with child sacrifice. And we believe in like a transactional salvation where we get into heaven if God like damns our children. I was like, where are you getting this from? Like, I didn't say that. Here's the clip. I stand by what I did say. And he was like, well, the title of the video is Calvinism Promote a Spirit of Child Sacrifice. And I was like, I didn't even pay attention to the title. I guess I'm a self-absorbed YouTuber, because I was looking at my words and I'm going, what could I have possibly said to trigger this to this kind of degree? But I think people started filtering what I said through Jordan's kind of like provocative question. And, to Jordan's credit, he was posting the highlight, trying to get people to go watch the whole video. He wasn't trying to I don't think he was trying to start like any sort of brouhaha. Like
that's always the goal with a short, right? You want to bring them over to your main content, but that doesn't always happen. So
very rarely ever. Well, it did. I think it did this time, man. I mean, like, goodness. Next thing I know, I've got Calvinists like coming out going, Warren said, Calvinists are okay with child sacrifice. And I was like, that wasn't the parallel I was making. And then James White comes out and, he loves to call me a Bible twister and a liar. And I kind of, we're really good friends. And it's kind of like, you might call your buddy like a bad name in private, or a jerk and slug his arm. So like James White and I are like this. So a lot of people think that he was really upset with me, but this is just how we treat each other normally over dinner.
Yeah.
We meet like once a week for dinner and we do Bible studies.
Sure.
I lead the study, obviously. And so I didn't think it was going to be a big deal. Like I was like, people are going to know James White is just being kind, and these are pet names for me. But it turned out like people thought he was serious when he called me a liar and a Bible twister and denier, and kind of lit the whole internet on fire. You got
that "He who shall not be named" boost for sure.
I did, man. Thank you, James. I appreciate it.
I feel like James has entered this like stratosphere where like he always does the same thing, and it's always the same like cadence and rhetoric and propaganda type and then like all it does is rile people up. Like I bet you there's actually I want to believe, for some reason I have this hope in my heart, that there is only a small percentage of people who actually believe what he's saying, but other people just like how he says it and like that it's all the controversy, but they're like not expecting him to be telling the truth all the time. Like that's not the point. It's just like entertainment. Like it's just
I think people tune in saying defend our view. Just like defend our view. Like we don't care necessarily if it's all that substantive. We just want you to defend it. Like entertain us. And to be fair to James, like some of his content is very educational. He's got like areas of expertise he's very proficient in, and I think if one wanted to study rhetoric and that sort of propaganda, he's an expert to watch, because he'll come in and he'll dismiss, he'll mock, he'll ridicule, he'll diminish, he'll address something that kind of is related. You'll get a lot of this. Waving around, and you got to believe this, and don't flatten it out, and choice meats, and multi-orb, and you get all this stuff, and and then he'll start talking about something else, and you go, "Oh, he must have addressed that." And if you slow down, you're like, "Actually, I don't think he did. What did he say of substance?" You know,
he talks I just watched something where like Trump misspelled Nikki Haley's name or something like that, because now all this stuff has started in earnest, and Trump is in full throat, in earnest now, and so like somebody, the reporter just like served it up to him, like, "Hey, did you go too far?" And then you're like asking Trump, "Did you go too far?" Like, what's this guy gonna say? And so of course he's gonna say, "No, I don't think he goes too far because they don't let him tell the truth, and they," and he just rambled on, and you just like, it's just entertaining. He didn't address anything, and he's not saying anything and stuff. And so then I watched a James White short where he contradicts himself on I think Leighton posted it, or
over Pelagianism.
Yeah, on the Pelagianism one, that was super good, where he refutes himself, and it's just like the same cadence, he's not saying anything, and he contradicts himself, and everyone just sort of knows it now, like that's just kind of, I feel like that's where he's at.
I mean, I like James. I mean, I think he's contributed to at least half my views and half my follows. Like half the people that subscribe to Idol Killer are coming in there like, "Calvinists don't believe in infant sacrifice," and I'm like, "Yeah, I know that. Did you watch my old series on infant damnation? Like I pointed out Wayne Grudem, John Piper, John MacArthur. I quote these guys to show how you're not consistent, but it's cool because I'd rather you not be consistent with total depravity and reject infant damnation. Like these guys, like these are Calvinists I can lock arm in arm with on this matter." But yeah, it was he sent a lot of traffic to my website.
Well, I actually do have some pushback on you, Warren. I think that
don't push too hard. I'll fall over.
I know. You're a sensitive guy. I listened to it. I read what you said. I read the transcript, and then I listened to your explanation with Flowers and Jordan. And
which, if you're here and you haven't listened to that, go listen to it. I mean, it's long, granted, but I think you guys do a good job of explaining things. You point out James White's rhetorical flourishes and fallacies, and that he doesn't ever actually deal with anything of substance. Sorry, carry on, Eric.
Yeah, no, I mean, you should all go watch that and kind of get the multi-orbed view of like what's going on here, and what Warren's actually saying. And I think you were talking about the title that pushed the controversy here. I think I have something else that kind of pushed it a little bit. So at the comparison you're making is that there is sort of like the same energy, right? Mm-hmm. That when a pagan says, "Oh, well, if I have to sacrifice my child to Baal, but I get crops," then same energy as a Calvinist who says this, like, if you're a Calvinist that don't believe this, it's not aimed at you, right? But the same kind of mindset, and you don't even say Calvinist, by the way. It's the same kind of mindset as if, well, if my child goes to hell, but I get salvation, then I'm okay with that. Same energy is your comparison. Is that fair?
I think it's fair.
But I think if you had said, and like you said, this was sort of on the fly, it was festering a little bit, and then you just said it, and then you moved on. It was a 4-hour live stream. But I think in hindsight, what maybe even is a better point to make, and it was like less punchy and maybe wouldn't have been clipped out and wouldn't have all this controversy, is like if it was, and I think this would actually make your argument better. I think some of the Calvinists were offended when you said, the offense comes in, not just with the title, I think that's right too, but when you said, "As long as I get my salvation." And I think that is where, probably if you had to say it again, you might say something like, I don't think that people see it that way, even the infant damnation people, or if I get my salvation, that's fine. More like, since this is how God works, then that's just how it has to be. Right? Like even the pagan would be like, well, since this is the world I live in, since the gods are capricious like this. And you're saying, well, it could be also that you're indoctrinated. and the gods aren't actually this way. Or you would say to the Calvinist, it could be that actually God isn't evil and he doesn't damn infants. It could be that. And they're stuck in the propagandized thought pattern of, since God works this way, then infant damnation is just a price I have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Since this is the case, not necessarily as long as I get my salvation, right? But since God works this way, and you're saying like, well, what if God doesn't?
They're already seeing it as being out of their hands anyway, because they played no role in their own salvation. This is something that God elected them from eternity. They play no role in their own child's damnation, apart from him using them as the means potentially to drive them further into reprobation. That's a problem with meticulous determinism. But I could see that. I mean, I think if you come in and you go, this is just how God works, I have to accept it. He's God. Who am I? I'm okay with that. I have to be okay with that. What am I going to do? What's the alternative?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. One of the things too that's interesting is you have men like R.C. Sproul, not teaching it currently, but on the internet, the videos all over, where he's talking about, and he's channeling Edwards, and he's saying, look, when we get to heaven, we're going to be cheering God throwing our own mom into hell. Like our own family members, we're going to be cheering because we're going to be so full of God. We're going to be right there excited about his justice and his glory. And we're going to be cheering. Well, if you're an infant damnation proponent, that includes your infant children. You're going to be cheering God, throwing your infant into the eternal torment if you hold the eternal torment. Otherwise, you're just going to say they perish. Either way, you're cheering, right? If you're Edwards or R.C. Sproul, that kind of Calvinist. Now, when I'm criticizing infant damnation, that's not your MacArthur. That's not your Grudem. That's not your Piper Calvinist, right? The kind of Calvinists I grew up with are more of that. I'm going to be grieved, son, until God flips that in me and I see through new eyes. And if you're not one of the elect, I'm gonna be grieved until I start cheering and I start celebrating. Like, I mean, that's a strain of Calvinism, and people don't want to admit it. People don't like that, but it's out there. I grew up in it, and it's on the internet. That's the kind of spirit, is that you're going to be changed. So the only real way that my analogy or my comparison would really collapse, I agree with Jonathan Pritchett on this, is if the Calvinist says they will never be able to fully get over God throwing their loved ones into hell, and they'll be eternally questioning his eternal justice. But then no Calvinist would ever say that. So they don't take the only out available to that, But it was a quick quip where I'm just going, hey, there's kind of a similar thing going on here where, it's like, we're okay with God killing our infants and sacrificing them to the lake of fire, right? We're not sacrificing them, but God is essentially throwing them in. We're okay with that because that's how God operates, right? That's how God operates. The pagan, this is how God operates. I've got to do that. Same kind of energy, And but boy, it did not go over well. And one of the things that the adherents of infant damnation seized on was the ambiguity of the clip, and they rallied all the Calvinist troops together to say Warren is attacking Calvinism. But you see, when I'm making that quote, I'm not just thinking of Calvin. I'm thinking of Fulgentius of Rusp, who said that God throws infants into eternal torment. So like that's Roman Catholic. That's around the time of Augustine of Hippo. So I'm thinking Augustinian anthropology that was prevalent within Rome. I'm thinking even Arminians who would argue that a child has to actually have cognizant belief and faith. That was a small strain. And then also those Calvinists that would hold to this. So when I'm thinking of infant damnation, all of that's kind of muddied in my head. And I'm not going, all Calvinists affirm this. This is monolithic. You guys don't love your children, you bunch of pagan Baal worshipers, like I'm not thinking that. It's just a quick little statement. But boy, did it get spun. It got really spun.
And maybe this is okay, go ahead.
Well, no, just this is what the Calvinists believe all aborted babies go to heaven, then wouldn't that make abortion the greatest ministry in saving the most lives, and they should encourage it? I think Leighton said that this is what he thinks for his money, that this is what changed James White's view, and where he now sort of affirms infant damnation. Maybe, who knows? We don't know what he believes, but that he went away from this for that reason.
Well, MacArthur in that infant damnation video I did about 3.5 years ago, MacArthur comes in and he speaks to those who've had an abortion, and he's like, "That was a horrible thing, and your child is with God right now, and God loves your child. That's a horrible thing that you did. Like, even though the child is with God, this was a horrible, heinous act. Not just that you took its life, but that you committed murder. But if you trust God, he can forgive you, and you can come to know him. And like David, you could be reunited with your child." So MacArthur turns this as a heinous act, rightfully recognizing the termination of an innocent life. And he says God can redeem it. And so I tend to side with, like I said, MacArthur on this. But there is that kind of logical argument within adherents of infant damnation where they come in and they go, well, I don't really want to be telling people to kill their babies and give them all a pass. And then that means no longer is election unconditional, right? So it cuts on multiple levels. Like, if we just start killing babies and they all go to heaven, it's not unconditional. It's conditioned upon their innocence and their age. And so they have all sorts of logical problems that can arise with that.
Yeah, one of the main objections that, I don't know if, I think it was an objection that two different people made on X Twitter with regards to our position being that babies are innocent. I'm careful to say babies are innocent rather than necessarily babies automatically go to heaven, and I'll explain why. So two different people were saying that the best thing we could do would be to take the life of an infant in order to guarantee their eternal salvation. And aren't you brave enough to do this? I know that you would be disobeying a precept of God, but for the greater good, rather than suffer, damnation or whatever, why take the chance? Why not just take them out? And my response to that is that I think that I think Piper even gives this as one of his explanations, that he thinks there will be a second chance at some stage. And I know Brian Wagner has mentioned in the past that he reckons that in the resurrection for the Millennium Kingdom, that there could be a second chance there, where
like
that
a
person,
a post-mortem opportunity.
Because it does seem like this person just has a guaranteed pass being the baby, and then this other person, risks it and goes out into the world and whatever else. So it makes sense to me to say that God, being just, offers opportunity and provision, to be saved and to receive grace for everyone. I know that's hypothetical, but other people like Piper have responded to that. So I guess that's actually an objection, the one that Aaron says here that I was seeing leveled at us, about why don't you be brave and kill your children? If you think,
it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird where people,
weird thing to say.
People are going, how dare you criticize infant damnation? Why don't you just kill your children? That's kind of a weird rebuttal. That's
the thing is it's a distraction. It's a distraction, isn't it? So they're trying to say
this whole thing
my view is better than yours, because if I held your view, then this would be true, then this would follow, but
if they held our view, we wouldn't think that God eternally reprobated all of our children, but that we could raise them in the fear and admonition of the Lord, so that when they're older, they won't depart from it.
And this is like,
introduce
why
them to the loving God who they shouldn't run from, but run to,
And I posted a screenshot of one of these people that was making this argument. I won't say his name on here. He's mentioned often on Sociology 101, and he's in the comments a lot there. And I basically said that we call it hashtag Baalgate. So if you want to punch that hashtag into Facebook and stuff, it's
that's a successful. I mean, congratulations,
Drew.
You should be proud of that. That's a successful hashtag.
Yeah.
And there's 1 or 2 posts with Molechtroversy, so that if you want to look that one up too.
Molechtroversy was mine, but Baalgate's better. Baalgate's better.
I just needed something with gate in there, and the Baalgate just kind of felt like it wrote. So that's why we chose the thumbnail that we did.
And we were afraid that Babygate would be too general and start sending people to Amazon or Walmart.
Yeah, totally. But I reposted this and I just said, this whole thing is a distraction. It feels like a psyop to distract from what the issue was, which is infant damnation. And this is what White and others have not sought to defend. And anytime that it seems like everyone that I loved your post, Warren, your tweet or post that said that this was the general reaction that we got, where it was like, Calvinists be like, and then they say, I don't affirm infant damnation, but I don't not affirm it. Like, that was the general response, because there were so many people saying like, well, even if infant damnation is true, I read this guy's whole article, Caio, Brazilian guy, and he basically just said, we just need to, I don't believe in this. I don't believe this is true. We just have to trust, like, if you're counseling somebody on this, you just tell them that they have to trust that God is good and that he'll do what's righteous. But that person's not going to be satisfied with this ambiguous, like, that's what shipwrecks people's faith and what causes people to go, nah, I don't want anything to do with this. And one of the criticisms that I just heard on the, I don't know what they're called, Turretin fan broadcast with Frank and Dan, was they were saying that, oh man, I think I just lost my thought.
You said it was a criticism that was kind of new that came in.
Yeah. Somebody say something else and maybe it'll come back to me.
I think what's interesting is that this kind of comment from someone where it's like, impugning your motive and demanding an apology. I think that's what this is all about, especially from like Marlon and a lot of this stuff is like, you called it a psyop. It's just a way to get you to apologize.
How dare you bring this issue up?
Yeah, how dare you? And like, they tried this on flowers too for a long time, and they haven't really done it for a while because it didn't work. And it's not going to work on you now, where we distract from what the issue actually is. I did issue an apology in my 20-minute video I released yesterday, because I should have used stronger language. This was off the cusp of my head. I was just flying loose. If I were able to stop and script it, I would have also said that I believe it's of the spirit of Antichrist, because it stems from total depravity, which I've argued previously is a corruption or a denial of the incarnation. So I think it all stems from this denial of the person and work of Christ. But I wasn't trying to make some deep, profound anthropological argument. I was just like, hey, look at that. These two lines match. It was just kind of a real simple passing statement.
I'm gonna deal with this later. I do want to actually comment on Marlon's broadcast, because I watched that. It was like 13 or 15 minutes long. It wasn't too long. Jordan says that he thinks he genuinely misunderstood. That's possible, but I feel like if you're going to do a broadcast on this sort of thing, you need to do your due diligence. You need to go back. You need to do your homework. You need to be charitable. Maybe even message Warren and ask him what he meant and stuff. It's obvious none of that actually happened. And but I do want to comment on what you just said, Warren, about this isn't what I was going to say about the Turretin fan broadcast, but they were saying, okay, what they understood you to be saying was, okay, Calvinism is like sacrifice to Molech, because reprobation of an infant child is evil, sacrifice to Molech is evil, and the Antichrist is super evil, so that's why, this is spirit of Antichrist and stuff. And I tried to explain to them in a short, brief sentence that when you're talking about Antichrist, that you believe that this infant damnation doctrine specifically is an Antichrist doctrine, that it's from the spirit of the Antichrist. that what you're saying is that this total depravity, this, stain on human nature does violence to the idea that John was dealing with the Gnostics in saying that Jesus came in the flesh. And they were saying, no, he didn't come in the flesh. And so if you deny that, then that is the Antichrist, the spirit of the Antichrist that John was dealing with. Yep. And so you were arguing for a very specific scriptural thing, not like the Antichrist, like that guy,
or they're devil worshippers, and that's like they're possessed by Satan.
It's a specific, specific doctrinal issue that arises when you hold to the Augustinian perception of total depravity.
And this isn't some new thing I've been arguing. I mean, like, if you guys go back to my original Sin series, like I raised this issue almost 4 years ago, and I've been raising it in debates with Matt Slick and J.D. Martin and C.J. Cox. Anytime I debate total depravity, it's always one of my key points is that it, because of its view on the stain of our flesh, will, soul, and intellect, that if we say Christ came like us in every respect, according to Hebrews 2:14-18, that corrupts the incarnation. So one of the moves Augustinians have made, if you're Roman, you say, well, Mary was spared the stain of original sin, so Jesus didn't contract it through the virgin conception and immaculate conception and birth. If you're Protestant, you just go, sinful semen. He didn't have an earth daddy, so it's okay. But that also has problems. And I address all of this in my original Sin series, and I show how it still meets the definition of Antichrist by 1 John 4:2-3. These are verses that are I'm horrible with Bible memorization. People don't know. If I'm citing a verse, it's because I use it all the time. And so when I come in, I go, Hebrews 2, 1 John 4. This is a thing that I've been harping on for years because I think it's really important. And so you're right. When I'm talking about an Antichrist spirit, I'm saying that if followed to its logical conclusions, results in a denial of the incarnation and work of Christ. So I think because of total depravity or Augustinian anthropology, that leads to the doctrine of infant damnation. Not every Augustinian makes that jump. I would say the consistent ones do, but if you're inconsistent, like I would say John MacArthur, Grudem, and Piper are, you're in my camp. I'm okay with you being inconsistent on something I think is wrong, right? So, but if you're consistent with it, you're going to fall into the Fulgentius of Roop or the Jonathan Edwards or any of those kind of guys, and you're going to say, infant damnation. So I'm kind of following these little dots, and I'm not stopping to connect them for the audience because I don't know how often I need to repeat myself. Probably more, but I'm just assuming they're all following my train of thought.
I want to share for the audience just so that they're aware of what this is, because some of you may be unfamiliar with John's letters and so on, but I just wanted to read this so that we have this in mind and that we're looking at the scripture. By the way, whoever you were that commented last time, it's 34 minutes until we got to a scripture this time. Oh my goodness, the provisionists have taken 34 minutes to actually talk about and quote scriptures. Here we go.
You guys
it says, dear friends,
quote the Bible in your broadcasts? I thought provisionists weren't allowed to do that.
You have to do it immediately. You have to start the broadcast with it. The sooner you do it,
in order to quote the Bible in our broadcast, we first would have had to have read it, which obviously not.
Never. Not in my whole single life. Okay. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out in the world. This is how you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God, but every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming and is even now is already in the world. So for the sake of Frank and Dan, this is what you were talking about when you talked about the spirit of the Antichrist.
Oh, did they bring up the Antichrist statement?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm talking about
because they said you doubled down and then you tripled down and so on. And one thing so I want to do another scripture here. So you were talking about people that take this to its logical conclusion. And I've already got a tweet brewing in my mind, a post brewing in my mind for this tomorrow. So we'll see how it does. But here, okay, let's see what Jesus has to say about children. Okay, and this is like, from what I understand, little ones, right? At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, this is Matthew 18, by the way, and we're going to talk about Matthew 18 towards the end of the broadcast, hopefully. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, so who is great in the kingdom of heaven? He called a small child and had him stand among them. Truly, I tell you, he said, unless you turn and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like this child, this one is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one child like this in my name welcomes me. So this is the biblical view. This is Jesus's view of children. Okay. Now, as birthed out of all of this Baal gate stuff, I want to read you a Calvinist view of children. This is Rogue Calvinist. I don't recall his name.
Oh man, I was not ever going to shine the light on this gentleman.
I'm sorry. Here it is.
he's been a little obsessed with my channel. Scott, this was not my doing. This was just sprung on me. So if you wouldn't mind directing your angst for the next 6 months at the provisionist perspective, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
His name is Scott what? Scott Thong?
No, I don't know Scott's.
His name. This guy's name is Scott. Rogue Calvinist.
Yeah.
Okay. So he says, babies come out of the womb immediately complaining to God of their surroundings, screaming in contempt, fear, and a lack of faith. They soon begin coveting after everything in sight and will display extreme outbursts of wrath when they don't get what they want. They do not honor their father and mother, but must be taught how to. When they learn to speak and use logic, they immediately use those skills to lie and deceive their parents concerning their wrongdoings. They willfully disobey every parental command that they believe they can get away with when experience shows them they can't. Brothers will fight the moment they are able to swing a limb. I wouldn't know anything about that. I'm an only child. They easily believe fantastic lies like Santa Claus because they love lies. Do you hear that, people? Children are so sinful. These little ones, they're so sinful that they believe lies like Santa Claus because they love them. They love lies. And let's compare and contrast, right? Why did, if Jesus is comparing the kingdom of God to a little child, why didn't he say, oh, the kingdom of God is like this little wicked child over here? Like, where do we have Jesus or any of the apostles describing a child as wicked? Where is this coming from? But from the spirit of the Antichrist. Like you're talking about, and you talk about something that's going to influence how you parent. You were talking about this, Warren, in terms of, I can't even believe that. Like people, and I think I've vaguely heard this here and there, people denying their child and leaving them because they're being selfish and crying and they need to learn. That child, its only way of communicating, it cannot talk to you. So its way of communicating is crying. That's how it communicates with its parents. It has nothing to do with it being angry or selfish. We have needs. Are you selfish when you feed yourself?
Well, listen to this. Do we really believe when we cry out to God that he despises our cries for help? Like we're taught to despise the cries of our children. It's a disconnect. The parents will say, God, I'm having trouble at work or with my marriage or with this or that. Please, I'm hurting. I need you. But then they'll hear their baby crying out and they'll go, that little liar. He's just over there manipulating me. God, I need that raise. The disconnect the cognitive dissonance is palpable. It's palpable. But this is not unique to Rogue. Okay. I grew up, I'm going to name some names. Anybody who wants to start sleuthing. I went to David Pledger and Bill McDaniel's church out in Houston, Texas, spring when I was growing up. And these were some pretty rigorous Calvinist men. And they loved the Lord, but they were very rigorous. And among their adherents, it was not uncommon to hear those very things being taught. And I remember it because I was a child and looking at them going, you think that about me? That was that was one of the. So when I told you I was hungry, you thought that was because I was so sinful. I was manipulated. I just wanted chicken nuggets, I'm not complicated. I'm not out here trying to deceive my parents, But yeah, that is very consistent. And it's disgusting. It's a horrible view of children. It's not the biblical view of children. It's not what we see presented in Scripture. It is reprehensible. It's an argument from philosophy based on their anthropology, but it's not biblical.
How do you model a godly love for your children if you believe that this is how God views all of mankind? Now, granted, I know that mankind is wicked and that God's wrath abides on unbelievers. Let's be clear here. But we also believe that God provides and that he's gracious to everyone. Whereas if you're holding this idea that maybe God just has this view of you full stop, and that's that, I mean, I imagine that affects your parenting. And I'm not saying don't clip me and say that I believe that all Calvinists are bad parents or anything. That's not
no. He just said all Calvinists are bad parents. You don't take it in context where he said, don't say that I'm saying this. I don't believe that. Just cut that out so you can have him saying all Calvinists are bad parents. Send that to James White. The provisionist perspective needs more attention. When I was a young parent, when my son was born, I was still a Calvinist. Then my daughter was born. I was still a Calvinist. I remember my children crying and me going to go to them and my wife saying, no, we've got them on a schedule. And then I was thinking, oh, they're manipulating me. They're trying to get me off that schedule. And that Calvinist programming comes in and it affected the way I viewed my children. Because remember, I was indoctrinated into this high view of Calvinism since I was knee-high to a rat. Since I was a viper in a diaper, I've grown up my whole life hearing this stuff. So, like when I actually became a parent, I started to view my children that way, and it affected me. But luckily, by the time my triplets were like 6 months, I came out of Calvinism, and I was heartbroken. I wasn't like a horrible parent, but it affected me enough to where I was guilty for the way that it made me perceive my children. I was literally remorseful. I'm speaking of me, not every Calvinist. Maybe some of you hyper guys will sympathize with me, but that was my experience.
And so it's understandable why you would come against these views so strongly, because they've negatively impacted you in such a way that you don't want other people to be negatively impacted. And you told a few little snippet stories in 101 that I won't share here, nor do I remember specifically enough to retell. But I mean, it becomes obvious that besides your polemics, just the care in terms of where this is coming from and the concern that it's coming from. Now, I only have a few minutes left. I want to make sure I get this in here, and then we can spend the rest of the time. Yeah. So this is a meme that I made. This is Chris Fisher inspired, helped me come up with this. So this is a cartoon that says, "I'm mad." And then the person says, here's a solution. And then they show Matthew 18:15-20. So I'm just going to read that real quick for you. Matthew 18:15-20 says, if your brother sins against you, let me pull this down so you can actually see us. If your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he won't listen, take one or two others with you, so that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be established. If he doesn't pay attention to them, tell the church. If he doesn't pay attention to the church, let him be like a Gentile and a tax collector to you. So I could read the rest of it, but you get the gist. So the idea is that this person's offering this solution. I'm mad. Well, here, why don't you go to your brother and try to, no, I don't want a solution. I want to be mad. And this is kind of two responses from that, were made public and so on. I won't name one brother, but another one was Marlon Wilson, and he expressed that he was personally offended by what you said. And my question for him and my question for our audience is, and even my question for myself, I was discussing this with my wife, to what extent should we be obeying the spirit of this passage here of Jesus' commands? If he's our Lord and he gets to tell us what to do and we're to submit to that, even if it feels uncomfortable, then how should we respond, especially if it's a personal friend? Now, I don't think you and Marlon Warren are personal friends, but this other person,
we're not as close as me and James White. I would say we're probably more like that. We're really close. I've been on this program several times. We've messaged each other for years. So yeah, I've known Marlon for a long time now.
Yeah, he has access to you. You know, he can reach out to you if he wants. And this other person who shall remain nameless, from what I understand, is a personal friend of someone else involved in this, and they were posting about it and all this different stuff. And I made this joke on Twitter. I posted on our Facebook too, I think, you know, if your brother sins against you, be sure to publicly post it and complain about it for everyone to see. Matthew, mad with a D, Thew, 18 verse 15, I think I said, or whatever. And the point is I feel like we've just tossed, like I've seen a few responses to this meme that I made and me posting that people just say, well, that's about a local congregation. We don't have to do that online. And I guess I agree to a certain extent.
That's pretty convenient. That's pretty convenient.
Here's my take.
Yeah.
If I'm a public figure and you don't have access to me, and there's something I've said and you want to criticize it, I'm fair game. I think that's reasonable. So if you can't reach me, like you see something that I made and you can't reach me, you can't reach out. Now, I think my content is available on YouTube. My content's available on Twitter, on Facebook. I don't check my website messages as much as I should. People get a notice from me every like 4 months. But you could reach out to me in theory through those other means. But if it's something that I'm saying and you want to push back on it and you go, I disagree with Warren on this. This is why I'm critical of this interpretation or this view. I think since we're in the public, then I think to some degree we're fair game. But if you have access to me and you're taking personal offense, I don't know why you wouldn't just reach out to me and go, dude, this is how I took it. Is that what you meant? Like, I'm really upset, you know? And give somebody an opportunity to clarify or apologize or set you straight. Like, I mean, but yeah.
It seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And I say this because, you know, I put together a short, you can see it on our thing, and Marlon talks about being really merciful and really charitable. And I was surprised as I was cutting this together, he referred to you as speaking lies and a liar 9 different times. And if you know anything about editing shorts and putting them together, you watch them over and over and over and over again, and you want to make sure it's nice. You got your background music, you know, a bit of B-roll sometimes in there. And this started to like bother me just hearing him say this over and over and over again. And I thought, man, like, this is just, you know, not good. Why didn't he, you know, say something before going? And it seemed like to me like he misunderstood. He was going off on this tirade. I mean, even after you guys clarified, he posted publicly saying that he's cool with Leighton now because they've messaged, but you aren't cool and you have to apologize and all this different stuff. And I guess, you know, outside of Marlon, I guess my challenge for us of being online in these spheres, and I recognize that if it's an internet stranger and you get offended by something they say, I don't think, or they're offended. Do you need to approach an internet, like somebody you don't know, but somebody you've been interacting with, somebody that's a brother?
Somebody you have an opportunity to speak to in private. That should be your preferred method or channel first.
Hey, look who's here. I was decreed to be offended by the things I believed I could speak.
I think that this is what this needed. We needed Phaeton Lowers in here to weigh in. And so I'm glad that Phaeton's here to tell us.
I think you read it wrong. This is Leighton Flowers, isn't it?
Oh,
not to be confused with.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
I don't want to be too confused by that. But I think another thing too that bothers me about this Matthew 18 thing is sometimes people will dismiss it on the basis that like you're a heretic or you're an unbeliever. So I just get to treat you like however I want to treat you. If I deem that you're a heretic or unsaved or whatever. But if somebody's professing to love Jesus and they don't seem to be like a particularly evil person, I think that we have to give each other benefit of the doubt and approach people in that same spirit.
But we don't do this. I mean, to be fair, we don't do this at church either.
No, we don't.
You know,
we don't.
The Christians are so
That's
bad
right.
at conflict resolution.
That's
and
right.
Having hard conversations that it's so much easier to abandon or make public statements, or however you want to. But this having hard conversations, we don't do it at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm available. I've got a very thick skin. I think I've demonstrated that over the years. Somebody reaches out to me, and I got to get better at this because I'm so available. I have random people stopping by my home looking me up on the internet and being like, I'll take you out to dinner. Let's talk about the Lord. Or I'll get a message and go, hey, I really need to talk. Can you call me? I'm like, who is this? What do you need to talk about? And they're like, Jesus. And I'm like, okay, here's my cell number. Like, I need to get better at being harder to reach.
It's called boundaries, Warren.
I need healthy boundaries. My point is, out of all the YouTuber guys that are out there, I'm probably the easiest to reach and the most available. So, you know, if somebody has an issue with me, they can get a hold of me and we can discuss it pretty easily, I think. You know, I can't say I'll pick up the phone immediately, but within a day or so, we should be able to speak. And when Marlon responded, the order that I saw it in, and I think this is the correct chronological order, was obviously Jordan posted the infamous 1-minute clip, and then that somehow made its way to White, and then he jumped all over it and was like, her, believe this, and then you're an idiot and a liar, and I'm outraged, and then I don't think he called me an idiot. It was implied. He didn't say it, and then Marlon's. I think from the way that because I was editing this too, and I'm editing my response to White, and I see that I can map Marlon's response almost 1-to-1 to White's.
Wow.
So I think that perhaps Marlon was responding more to what White had said and presented it than what I had actually said. So sometimes we have filters. And so maybe Marlon was coming to what I said through what White said. I'm trying to be charitable. And I think maybe he was like, Warren said we sacrifice our babies. You're a liar. And I'd be like, yeah, if anybody said Calvinists believe they sacrifice their baby, I'd be like, you're a liar. No Calvinist believes they're sacrificing their babies. I would have been there with them saying that that's not true. But, you know, again, my statements were misinterpreted, and then it just kind of snowballed out.
I know Marlon could have got on a surfboard and rode the algorithm like we did. But
I mean, like you said, you're accessible, and who better to explain what you meant than you? I think that's pretty reasonable, and I think that my point in saying that is if you're pointing out a particular doctrine or an issue with the doctrine idea, you know, like you said, you're a public figure, you're putting out public YouTube videos, then respond that way. But he started off by saying that he took personal offense to it as a Calvinist, and it seems like lots of people have been taking personal offense to it. And I guess my question is, are we going to at least try to prayerfully be obedient to Jesus in this Matthew 18:5, or do we just want to be mad? Do we just and this is myself here. You know, I was talking with someone just yesterday, and I decided to message them. Now this is a situation where I messaged them, and then I realized that I had already done what I could with this person, and that but let's try. Let's try to do this.
Yeah, I mean,
give it the old be like Israel. Israel's son. No, sorry. Israel was renamed Jacob just before Esau met him, and Esau ran up to him and embraced him and hugged him around the neck. They were counted as enemies after all that betrayal, and Jacob didn't even apologize to him. You know, he just ran up and embraced him.
So how much do you think this has to do with the fact that we have provisionists, or, you know, non-Cal writers and people who talk publicly about these things have had to have such thick skin because, you know, every other month the quote about free will is a pagan idol that the non-Calvinist, the Arminian, has worshipped from to, like, that free will is a pagan thing that we worship. Like, that quote is out there so much, and that idea is out there so much, and we're free will worshipers. And, you know, I could be, if I really wanted to be, I could be really personally offended by that. Like, you're telling me that I worship myself rather than Jesus. I'm a little bit offended. Like, how dare you? You don't have no idea what I've had to sacrifice and endure in my life to maintain worshiping Jesus. Like, and that you're saying I worship my free will. You know, how dare you? I could play that game too, but I've had to develop the thick skin because, you know, the Calvinists rule the internet and they've won everything. Is this have something to do with The Calvinists haven't had to have that thick skin because they just have run everything for so long, and now people are bringing pointed arguments to them and they don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's either that, it's potentially that, or it's just faux outrage.
Well, I think there's a third option. I think there's a third option too, and that is that it struck a nerve, and it caused them to introspect on a particular incoherence in their doctrine or conflict that they didn't like, and it made them feel things they didn't like, and so they lashed out at me as the source of that feeling. That's usually what happens with cognitive dissonance. So it could be faux outrage, could be cog dis, or it could just be, hey, here's a great opportunity to get at our ideological rivals and try and drag them through the mud. So there's all sorts of different motives that are out there. And genuinely, I spoke with a guy yesterday on the internet, and he was like, you said Calvinists don't care about their kids. And I was like, do you have a timestamp for that? And he's like, yeah, it was in that video where you said Calvinists promote a spirit of child sacrifice. I was like, I didn't say that. And he goes, yeah, it's the title. Isn't that from the video? I go, no, I didn't say that. That's the title? Okay, well, that explains a few things. And so I went and I pulled the clip out, and we talked through it, and I gave him some old resources and said, look, this is my view. This is my consistent. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I was like, did you just apologize on the internet? He's like, I did. I was like, so we're okay? And he's like, yeah, we're okay. And I'm like, this is weird. That's not supposed to happen anymore. Like, you're supposed to hate me and like you're supposed to be angry, my home address and like naming my children and coming after me. Like, isn't that how this works? Like, what are you doing being civil and kind? Like, that's not normal.
Yeah, totally. Hey, I've got to go at the hour mark, but I wanted to say, if you have any thoughts on this, post them on social media, hashtag Baalgate. We want to hear what you guys have to say. Be sure to comment below and let us know what you think about all of this. This is our kind of off the cuff take, a few prepared things. Do you guys have any just sort of concluding thoughts you want to leave people with, or anything additional to add?
I'm reading things, like what you guys said, you and Flowers and Jordan said, is that people should be way more offended by the idea that God sends infants to hell, considering the biblical evidence and considering just what that is, just the immoral Antichrist spirit. You should be way more offended at the people who believe that and who are defending it in light of all of this than you are about some 1 minute clip. I mean, that's what this is for me.
I agree with you wholeheartedly there, Eric. The doctrine is detestable, and you might get upset that we brought up a criticism of it, and I've had several Calvinists come in and go, I don't affirm that. And I go, good, I didn't say you did. We're in agreement. Will you help me condemn it? And they're like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. It's if we're not ideological rivals on this doctrine and we agree, then join me. Like I don't. Hey, let's gang up on the people in Roman Catholicism that follow Fulgentius of Root. If you don't want to come after fellow Calvinists, then as a Calvinist who rejects it, go after those Fulgentius type guys over in Rome. At least help me condemn them. And if you're an Arminian, and you want to pick on the Calvinists, or maybe you're a Roman Catholic and you don't want to bother the Calvinists, maybe you can find some Arminians that hold this, and we can get enough of a consensus to where eventually we're condemning it wherever we find. That's pretty cool. Like, if you don't want to punch left or punch right, whatever they say, okay, whatever. But like, let's condemn a doctrine that we all agree is not representative of Christ.
That's right. Hey, everyone. Babies are innocent. And be blessed. Be a blessing. See you later.